Hey gang, it's John here. Not going to do anything crazy or silly this time, or maybe not even wanted. I don't know how you guys feel about all this. I know this is going to be a little bit of a downer for what's going to be a fun episode, but I needed to take a moment to recognize someone who, even though I never met the person, he still had an impact on my life. His name was Eric Cohn, and he passed away last month after battling a long battle with depression. He was a huge Batman fan and a huge supporter of this podcast as well as many of my other podcasts. And like I said, I never met the man, and yet despite that, always had a positive word for what I did, always had a positive thought for me whenever I was feeling down. And I just wanted to take a moment to say, you know, folks, in your life there are going to be people who, despite all the appearances of seeming everything is great, that they need help. And, you know, we can't take advantage of just how good we have it with them. We also have to make sure we're there for them during the bad. And it's been a month still, and like I said, I never met the guy, and I'm still thinking about him. So I just wanted to dedicate this episode of the Batcave podcast, because every time now I've been putting out one since then, I keep thinking, what would Eric think as I release it? So I'm asking that now, what will he think of this one as we talk about shame? For you, Eric, rest in peace. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and we're continuing that journey through the third season of the Batgirl episodes. And as we've seen throughout this run, we've had some ups and we've had some downs. I mean, nothing has ever really met with what we saw in the first, and even in, you know, the up and down of the second season, the ups of this third have not been even the heights of the second. But we have some hope here in this two-part episode we're going to talk about today, dealing with the return of shame. And I've got another returning guest here for this episode to talk about it here. He's the host of the Hunnic Outcast, the Hunnic Outcast himself. Welcome, sir, to the Batcave podcast.
John, it's great to be back. Thank you for thinking of me. And this is probably one of the most underrated episodes of Season 3.
Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about this episode. Two-parter, the last two-parter of the Batman 66 series. We have The Great Escape, which aired on February 1st, 1968, and The Great Train Robbery, which aired February 8th, 1968. And I'm going to lay the cards on the table. I agree with you there that this is one of the more underrated episodes. I think this is probably one of the best of the third season, and it even sort of hints and approaches possibly being even a really good second season episode.
I think the guest stars were having more fun on the show than West and Ward at this point.
Yes.
It's interesting because I've watched Back to the Batcave, and I've also seen Hollywoodland, and I found something really fascinating with these actors, that back then, TV actors, when they weren't working on their shows, when they would try to get work after the show while the show was on hiatus, trying to get work in movies, and they couldn't because they were always being typecast as their characters on TV. It's interesting because today, in the 21st century, I'll go with something like The Walking Dead. You have Laura Conhan, who's on Walking Dead, but now she's in a Batman movie. She's Martha Wayne. She's on The Boy. I mean, it's interesting that actors then, they couldn't get anything outside of work. And when I was reading the Batcave book, they do talk about Burt Ward being very, like, he was aloof and he really didn't want to be bothered on the set and talking to guest stars, and the guest stars having a ball. And a lot of the guest stars are saying that, you know, once you're on something like Batman, there's nothing left for you to do. Nobody's going to really hire you after this. And I heard that Burt Ward was upset because he had a chance to be in The Graduate. And I think the studio wouldn't let him out of the contract, or they just kept seeing him as the boy wonder. So I could understand at this point the attitudes between Ward and West in the third season. They were really high and they weren't really giving the performances they should. And it kind of shows in the last episode we talked about, and it kind of shows in this episode. But I think what smooths everything over are the guest stars, and there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. Yeah, this has got a big guest cast. It's got a lot of cameos in it. We start off with, and again, this is why I say maybe a second season episode. We've got Gotham State Penitentiary. Shame is behind bars. He's being visited by Frontier Fanny and Calamity Jan. Jan, who is his latest love interest, his mole in this episode, who played by Dina Merrill, who was married to Cliff Robertson at the time.
Yes, according to the book, Cliff didn't know that he was going to be coming back, but the producers had a lot of fun with the character. And apparently, I have not listened to your episode on Shame in the longest time, but from reading the book, I heard that the producers liked Cliff Robertson. They wanted him on the show, and Cliff was like, well, can I play a cowboy that's really dumb? And they were like, sure, and he got to do his own stunts and pick his own costume. And when he was asked to come back, he was like, well, can I bring my wife in to play my love interest? And they were like, sure, whatever you want. And it works and it shows. And I think that's what makes this episode great, because Diana and Cliff really know how to play off of each other. And it really shows with a couple of the back and forth dialogue that we'll get to later in the episode. But even the kissing scenes, even though it's TV, it does seem real. So I do appreciate that they did let an actor who, usually actors are like, well, I want this and I want that. No, I think it was really smart that they let Cliff have his way, and letting someone like Cliff Robertson have his way, it pays off in the end.
Yeah, Joel Eisner's Bat Book points out, there's an interview with Robertson, or at least some commentary by him, how they were very willing to let him sort of open up and work on the character and do certain things that, you know, he doesn't see very often in television shows or movies. How much of that was, well, we're at the end of the run, we got nothing to lose, and how much of that was just the general vibe of the show, because Burgess Meredith had done ad-libbing as well in the past, and Cesar Romero. But, I mean, it's not just the two of them. You know, it's not even just, you know, because we also have Frontier Fanny, played by, and I always pronounce her last name wrong, Hermione Bedelli.
I think that's what it's pronounced. I was researching her the other night. She is one of my favorite character actors. I know her, at least her voice. If you ever watched The Secret of Nim, she's Aunt Shrew.
Okay.
And she also, for your Doctor Who fans out there, and I made sure I went down the rabbit hole on this one of her sons is David Tennant. And he was not only Barty Crouch Jr. in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, he's also one of the doctors on Doctor Who. She's great in this episode, but I feel we don't get enough of her. She's the overbearing mother-in-law.
See, I remember her in particular from a Bionic Woman episode, Black Magic, that had an all-star cast. There was her, there was Julie Newmar, Abe Vigoda, Vincent Price, Egghead from Batman. They were all in it playing family members who were all trying to sort of backstab each other. It was pretty funny, actually. And speaking of funny, this is the other thing that works. I mean, you've got this already a strong cast starting out here, guest cast, but all the elements that we remember and what we liked about from Shame are there. There's the cowboy music playing. There's Shame, even though he's in the prison garb, his own version of it, so to speak, he's still wearing the purple kerchief. And I liked how, you know, at the end when they're finishing up, he's like, good. You know, that was a Shame thing all the time, because I was waiting for, because they did it a lot in the first story, was the whole get it, got it, good. And they don't do it until the second part, but they do work it in. So it's all a nice throwback to Shame's first story.
Yeah, I was afraid, pardon the pun, we'll get there as well going into this one, because you have a cowboy versus Batman. And the only thing I thought about at the time, because I decided to take my positive affirmation bat pill for this one. I know that Gunsmoke was still a big thing, and there were some westerns still going on. I was almost hoping with the first Shame episode, why is a cowboy there? Would it make more sense where he was a star of a show and Batman was overshadowing him, and he was just upset that Batman was overshadowing him. I mean, again, Shane was using a gun. Batman's parents were killed by the gun.
Right.
And I know that years later we would have a villain called Deadshot Ricochet. I would feel that this would be great social commentary because, again, when the kids in the 60s and 70s, even the 80s with Transformers with Megatron the gun, kids were using them more and more. And I was kind of hoping that with Shane using the gun, Batman would use some sort of social commentary and saying why guns are terrible and guns are not toys. That would have been a little bit. It would have been a little bit preachy, but I think for this episode, it would have worked a lot better. Other than Batman versus a cowboy, I could say it's the 60s. I could say Gunsmoke was on, but if you try to watch that today, I don't think millennials who are starting to watch the show now get it. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a shame because this could have been written a lot better. Again, I love Cliff Robertson in this. I love the idea of this. My only argument is somebody dressed as a cowboy shows up because Westerns were still big at the time. And it just, it hasn't aged too well. Past that, if it's not Cliff Robertson, and I mean, he could have gone Yosemite Sam on this one, but it works.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, especially the third season. The third season is definitely time-stamped. The surfing episode, the whole boxing episode, there was still a fascination to the extent that, the entire country was interested in boxing, and it was featured on mainstream network television, whereas now it's like you want to watch a boxing match, you got to go to pay-per-view. So, I don't know, I agree with you that, yeah, it could be dated in that regard. We haven't had anything much in the way of a decent Western movie in recent times, as far as I'm concerned. The last great one to me was The Shootist back in the 70s. But still, I can't help but, myself, I guess, because I can appreciate Westerns of the time and Gunsmoke, like you mentioned and such, I still can appreciate this episode. We do see, then, the plan go into action. And we've got Shane pitching horseshoes. And again, this is an episode that has a lot of great lines. I love the line about the engineer he gave 3 bullets to in exchange for the timepiece he now has.
And it's dark for Batman 66 episode with something going for kids. But again, I mean, there was an episode with Zelda the Great where we see 2 gangsters shoot each other and I know that in the pilot episode, a woman died in a nuclear reactor. So they kind of found a way to discuss that these were still villains and he could still make the show dark. And the way that Cliff delivers the lines,
yes,
it works. So yeah, what doesn't work, however, and again, I guess because it's comic book logic, they're allowed to pitch horseshoes. I know that the prison guards have guns. Shane knocks one of them out with an iron horseshoe, and then Fanny and Calamity Jan have a tank.
Yes.
Bust into the prison, and is this when they play? No, this is not when they play the cavalry music. They do it later, but they do at least bust in with a tank. And my only question to this is, I did my best to research prison walls and breakouts because there are a lot of them. It's always fascinated me as a kid.
Right.
Like how easy it is, especially with all the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Apparently, busting out of prison wasn't as insane as you may think. I mean, there were people that were able to hide in the laundry trucks or dig the way out. It did happen. However, in real life, they would probably get like 10 feet away before being caught and having their sentence doubled or tripled.
Yeah.
Here, with a tank, I mean, the cement walls, from what I've heard, sometimes they could block a tank, they couldn't. It really depends on the construction. But I do love the gag here because they're trying to go back to the 60s where they have a tank.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that. And it's probably the most interesting breakout, I think, and this does feel like something out of second season.
The tank, by the way, I believe, is from the second season Penguin 3-parter, when the tank was gold and they just repainted it red.
I thought that was the same tank. It did look the way it was shaped, and I guess they just had to repaint it because I was like, why is it red? And I'm like, okay, it must be the golden tank from, that's the only thing I thought of, yeah.
So they get away, and now I've got a load of questions with the next scene, and then we're still only on the teaser, but it's so good, but there's so many quirky things that you got to point out.
Excellent fondue, Barbara. It isn't often a bachelor gets a chance for a good home-cooked meal.
Well, it isn't often a spinster gets to cook for a bachelor. Hello? Yes, it's for you, Daddy.
Oh. Thank you. Commissioner Gordon. What, Chief O'Hara? Oh, yes, I'll take care of it right away. Hold your phone up next to the bat phone and put me through to you-know-who.
What's the matter?
Shame that monstrous maverick of malfeasance has made good his threat to come back.
That's the signal for the bat answer phone to be put into action.
Yes, Commissioner?
Dreadful news, Batman.
Exactly what's wrong, Commissioner?
Shame has just fled Gotham City State Prison. Can you meet me in my office?
We'll be right there, Commissioner.
I must beg your forgiveness, Barbara, Bruce, but duty calls.
Yes, I think I should be running along as well, Barbara. It wouldn't be proper for the two of us to be here alone in your apartment without a chaperone.
But what about my fondue?
Is fondue considered home-cooked meal? It's just melted cheese in a pot.
You know, it was the 60s. Fondue, it was the latest fad back then. It's kind of like how in the 80s the microwave was like the biggest thing in the world.
Right.
Or when they finally, I think in the season 3 episode when Barbara was telling Chief O'Hara about the answering machine, like how it was primitive back then. It was, you know, I think it was just, fondue is just something where you could just melt something in a pot, dip bread in it, and eat it. I mean, where I was in New York, there's a restaurant dedicated to fondue. I have been fascinated by it. It's just one of those things where I guess the producers, or I guess they were kind of hoping to get more sponsors, and why not have Batman or Bruce Wayne promote a fondue set and have Alfred come in a 30-second commercial where Robin and Batman are ready to go out, but they can't make something fast. And like, Alfred just comes in, might I say, sir, that I have this fondue set. That's the only thing I think of that's product placement, yeah.
Oh. And God, you talk about dating for the times, you know, the Barbara referring to herself as a spinster.
What can I say about Barbara in this season that we already haven't discussed? She's plucky. We all crushed on Yvonne Craig, not because she's sexy, but because she's fun. And it's amazing how she didn't have a boyfriend, or I think she was dating somebody on that Joker episode, or whatever the case may be. But I do love how in this one, I guess they're trying to hint that Bruce Wayne and Barbara could be dating. As I said, I know in that Batman Beyond episode, Barbara mentions that they did date for a while. But Barbara's kind of like a Mary Sue or a Jill of all trades, where she kind of does everything. But I do love her expression, especially when the phone goes off and she's kind of like, well, what about my fondue?
Yeah.
You would think that as she's listening, now I don't know if she's trying to be naive or she knows something's going on, so that's how she's going to excuse herself to go into Batgirl. But it is possibly like between this and you know, The Dark Knight Rises, where Gordon still doesn't know that Bruce Wayne is Batman, is kind of embarrassing at this point.
Now, why did they bother with the bat pole scene at the beginning of Act 1 of them coming down when Robin was already in the Batcave? They've done episodes where the Batmobile just automatically comes out of the Batcave at the start of Act 1, so I don't understand why they did that. There's a couple of little scenes in here that are clearly filler to pad it out a bit.
I think it has to go back to, like you said, filler, because there seems to be a lot of talking dialogue, a lot of exposition. You know, it's 22 minutes without commercials. They have to fill in the time somehow. I have heard of this, especially with something like The Simpsons, where they have an episode where it's over, and then all of a sudden they have this Malibu Stacy Funzo episode for 30 seconds, and I'm like, why? And the reason for that is, well, we have 30 seconds. We don't know what else to do. We're just going to put this in. I don't know if it was a flub or if it was recycled film or tape. I'm not too sure what the point of this was. It doesn't make any sense other than the only thing I have to say is it's got to be filler. It's got to be that we have to fill in 22 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So they get to Gordon's office. They learn that the tank was found, but the evidence has been ruined. There's no chance of even any fingerprints on it because the tank was towed because of an expired parking meter. And I did like that line from Batman where he's like, we have to talk about, some of the things that Mayor Linseed's doing here in town, or something like to the effect of the parking rules and such. The first time Batman's actually, instead of just going, no, they did wrong, that tank should have been towed, it's understandable, he's actually going, yeah, we got to discuss this.
Well, I do like the fact that they bought the tank at a used tank lot.
Yes.
I guess the economy was worse then than it is now, that you could just buy a tank at a used tank lot. But yeah, I love the fact that it was towed. Imagine, if you will, just going to the city and just like looking at a parking meter and seeing how a tank, how do you even tow a tank is my question. But it's the 60s, so I guess they had to use an excuse that with the budget they couldn't keep it around anymore. But yeah, Linseed, he's still in this season, right? Because I think he was in the clavicle episode.
Yes, he was.
Okay, so he's still around. It's funny. Again, this is when I've heard that they were going to put in the laugh track, I think in the first season or the third one. This, I guess, would have been the time to put in that, because this is where it feels a little bit like a sitcom. I'm having a good time with this because it's, again, I go back to, it's the 60s and it's comic book Silver Age logic. But yeah, we have to get rid of the tank, and how they get rid of the fingerprints, they never really say. I guess they wipe them off or whatever. But again, you know who the criminal is, so I'm not too sure why they're bringing up the fingerprints.
It's, to me, this episode in particular took every opportunity it could to work in a sight gag, a laugh line. I mean, there's like you said, you could almost expect the laugh track to kick in. There's a lot of humor here. There's a lot of jokes, like when they bring in the sawhorse because, Gordon gets a call from Bonnie saying there's a horse outside, and out in comes O'Hara with a sawhorse, a work, horse thing for carpentry and what have you. And there's a note attached to it. And I'm laughing as Batman tries to read the note the way Shame wrote it in his style with his accent and stuff. But I didn't laugh as much at the Batty reference that Gordon made that sort of made Batman uneasy.
Yeah, it's like Gordon is still the most earnest one, or I don't know if he's the most naive one.
Oh, he's definitely the most naive.
Yeah, he's definitely the most naive, but I do love... I guess that's supposed to be a callback to when we talked about with the Penguin episode where O'Hara goes, I'd wager, and this offends Gordon. Here it's like... Now, Gordon says something offensive, and he looks at Batman, but I don't even know why Batman and Robin would be offended by this, because it's driving me batty. Again, laugh track should be inserted. I cringed because I guess it was just filler, but the best part is where Adam West is trying to talk in Shane's accent, because, again, this is where it's the comedy show, and this is where the humor is working.
Hereby am a telling you that I'm a gonna rob the Gotham City stage at 8:45 tonight. I'm a gonna steal a rock and a roll. I dares you to figure it out, dynamic dum-dum. Best regards, your enemy, Shame. It's full of misspellings, and I'm full of misgivings.
Holy gall!
It's funny because Adam West stated that he wanted to do something different for season 3, and he kind of is. It's not working as well as I was hoping, but I get a chuckle for him trying.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And as on cue, in walks Barbara, so now she's all in on what's going on, so this way we can work Batgirl into the story as well. We get to Central Park Stables, where Shame and his men are hiding out, and we're introduced to his two main henchmen. We're going to see, once again, as his third season, the way it works out, more will pour in for bat fights. But our two main ones who get names, have personalities, again, goes right back to first and second season. We have Fernando Ricardo Enrique Dominguez,
known as Fred, played by Barry Dennen. Somebody who also, like, when I went and did the IMDb search, I was like, wow, this guy has done some really interesting things, including he was one of the developers of Jesus Christ Superstar the Musical, played Pontius Pilate on stage and on film.
Yeah, he has a huge resume. He's done some voice work for video games. You could tell that you have to start somewhere, and he did. And apparently, according to the Bat book, he was just told, well, we want you to play a Mexican with a British accent. And he was like, okay. And it works. And somehow this feels very second season, because the henchmen in Batman 66, I've always said, are the best part. They always seem to play off of the villain very well, that they have their own names, they have their own personalities. I mean, they just didn't have shirts with goon written on. I mean, a couple of them did.
Yeah.
And a couple of them were named, like, I think with Joker, in the beginning, he called them Laurel and Hardy after famous comedians. And I know with Penguin, he would call them Birds. And Riddler would, you know, he would just get really dumb henchmen because he didn't want anybody smarter than him. But you always have, especially with the Sandman, when you had these two guys dressed up in their pajamas and they would have their names, they would always seem to stand out and work. And I think with Barry Denham, he wasn't utilized that much in this episode, but when he did have the line reads, they were definitely showstoppers, and it proves on how you start somewhere, how he has moved that up and on. And again, in the book, he was very gracious and happy that he got to be on the show, and I think he's the one who pretty much stands out. He does. I think, dare I say it, I think he's better than Shame in this episode at times.
You know, I might agree with that. I mean, there's certainly times where he gets the better lines and he delivers them well, but then he works well off Cliff Robertson as well. In particular, I like the whole thing where he's talking, because he's, again, like you said, he's supposed to be Mexican, but he's got a British accent, and there's the running gag throughout the whole thing of Shame saying to Calamity Jan, you know, are you sure he's Mexican? And at one point he just rolls out this long thing with high vocabulary words. This episode, by the way, going to get a lot of Bat vocabulary word cards for my collection done on this, because there's a lot of, you know, good SAT words on this thing. And when he's done, you know, Shame just finally looks at Jan and goes, yeah, I can't understand a word he's saying. He's Mexican. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. And we also meet Chief Standing Pat, who we talked about earlier. You know, one thing that was interesting, though, the other episode where we had an Indian featured Chief Screaming Chicken there, that episode for many years, many syndicated outlets wouldn't run the episode because they found Chief Screaming Chicken offensive. And yet this episode managed to make it into the rotation. Nobody ever points out that, you know, there may be some things about Chief Standing Pat that was kind of offensive.
I guess political correctness, again, we can go back to the Penguin episode where Dick is trying to be Spanish and all he can say is "sí, señor." But yeah. I don't understand how the Egghead episode is trying to be the least offensive, even though you have Everett Horton, not an actual Native American, and he's called Chief Screaming Chicken. I guess I could understand that, but Standing Pat, I kept trying to do the research of why he's called Standing Pat. Okay, I get it, he's standing and he barely speaks, and they do insult the thing with the peace pipe where he just blows one puff of smoke, and, you know, Calamity Jan is saying, like, well, he's saying, like, really glad to meet you, I hope we have a great relationship, and she goes through this whole thing, and, you know, Shame looks at her and goes, you got all that? And she goes, well, you know, that was shorthand. And
yeah.
Shame goes like, okay. I mean, to me, it's comedic, but it's offensive at the same time. And I know political correctness has killed comedy, but I would think that this one would be more offensive than the last. But, you know, he's a henchman, he's a goon, and you just kind of move on with it.
Right. But I got to admit, I like them both. I like them both, and I like the way they both have their moments in the show.
We're going to knock off the dynamic duo.
And Batgirl.
And then we're going to do something which I like to refer to as the Great Train Robbery.
That's scarcely original, you know.
A big mouth is better when it's shut, Fred. So keep your tongue harnessed and you'll have a thin lip.
I stand chastised.
Good. Now, you two characters from an old-time Western movie, I want you to go out and case the stage, because we're going to lift the rock and the roll. Now, that's part one of my caper. But we can't get to part two before we've done part one. Does that make sense to you?
Your lucidity is surpassed only by your remarkable command and penchant for gibberish.
Well, thanks, Fred. That's mighty nice of you. We're going to be good buddies. Now, we're going to meet, rendezvous, at 8:30. Savvy?
Savvy.
That means ugh.
Good. Okay, now you characters get, because me and my girl got a little sparking to do.
Cheerio.
Now we're actually getting something here where it's like there are steps to getting to the final objective, which is what we got in first and a number of the second season episodes. So again, I appreciate that. And he can't get to step 2 until he gets step 1 done. I like the whole thing with him. I even like the whole thing with him and Calamity Jan because he wants to fool around with her, but her mother, Fanny, won't let that happen until Shane marries her.
Yeah, that of course was a big thing then, now, yeah. I'm sure. But I do want to go back to one thing with Shane trying to discuss the plan with the Great Train Robbery and Fred being sarcastic. And I love how Shane's line read is like, a big mouth is better when it's shut.
Yes.
The whole thing with Shane talking about the plan and he's dumber than he was. The last one, he was kind of smart and he had a short fuse. Here, they've made him a little bit dumber. But I do love the line reads where he goes, we have to do step 1. We can't do step 2 until step 1 is done first, and the rock and the roll. And he keeps going on. And you figure, okay, move on. But the way he delivers the lines is really, it feels like the Jack Benny show. And it's really great how he's playing off of each other. And again, we go back to Frontier Fanny. Again, she refuses to have the two make out, and she's in front of him. I think this is when he also delivers the line read, why couldn't you have been born an orphan?
Yeah, I think that...
Is this what it's delivered?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But the rock and the roll, I guess we'll get into those props. It's pretty much the torch and the diamond drill, right?
It's the... the rock is the diamond, but the roll is the bankroll because he needs money in order to take care of some things there. Yeah. And I did like this whole thing. We got Batman figuring out what the rock and the roll is, but he doesn't know what the stage is. Then he gets the call on the bat phone from Batgirl. She knows what the stage is, but not the rest. So the two go and decide to meet to compare notes. But we find out that it's Barbara who's actually making the call, obviously, on the bat phone. She can't walk in as Batgirl. Well, she has actually done that in the past. But in this case, she does it as Barbara. And it sets up another one of these moments where, like you said, Gordon is completely clueless because he walks in as she finishes the call. Like she's done. She's put the case back and everything. And she's like, oh, I just wanted to invite you to the opera. And he's like, well, I can't go. I've got business to deal with here. And he goes, why don't you invite Bruce Wayne? And this is the only time we see matchmaking going on. But a moment later, the phone rings again. And it's Batman this time calling, and he asks to speak to Batgirl. And Gordon's like, Batgirl's not here. And so Batman hangs up. They're done. And Gordon just sits there looking like confused. And it's like, you didn't put 2 and 2 together? Your daughter was just in the room there? Nobody else could do that? And, of course, Batman, he's in the Batcave getting all frustrated with the whole thing. How does she do it? I don't understand it. And I missed it. I missed it this time.
How does she do it? A moment ago, I spoke to Batgirl on that bat phone. Now the commissioner tells me she wasn't even there.
I don't think we should even attempt to fathom it, Batman. She treasures her own anonymity every bit as much as we treasure ours.
Of course, you're right, Robin. Still, well, there's just no time. Let's go, Robin.
It was Chris Gould in his Batman at 45 that cleared it up for me because I'm looking at it going, why is Batman getting so frustrated? It's a role reversal scene because Batman is playing the part of Robin, getting, all vocal and loud and stuff. And Robin, being the more calmer person this time, gets to play Batman saying, calm down, she's got her identity and we have to respect it as much as she respects ours. They did that in the second season with the Batman Satisfaction, a Piece of the Action, the Green Hornet episode, where they did a role reversal as well, where Batman got frustrated and Robin had to calm him down.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though, and I'm sure people were screaming at the screen back then. I'm sure they're doing it now again, because I'll say it a million times more. They don't change the voices when the alter egos are in costume. No. So and Gordon, you can argue and you can say that Batman has all his gadgets to change the phone around. We've seen in other episodes how Batman's been able to change the phone around to, like, it goes from the hotline, but it can go to anybody's address or whatever. I get all that. But you can't tell me that you're the commissioner of Gotham PD and you can't tell that your daughter just happened to walk in the room, was near the bat phone, walks away, and then Batman calls up to speak to Batgirl, and even if she has gadgets to change the phone number around and he has gadgets, Gordon, the way that he delivers is like, well, Batgirl was never here. I was like, oh, come on. I mean, you've listened to the voices, or I would almost accept the fact that Gordon knows, but he has to play dumb for various reasons. But no, this is just... I think this is... One of your guests discussed this, I think, was season 1 or 2, where O'Hara and Gordon have been eating asbestos, or they must be eating paint chips or something, because this is really, really dumb and insulting the intelligence. I mean, this is just... This one makes me cringe.
Yeah. It's the whole end scene. I mean, everything was fine up until the end with Gordon, and frankly, even I don't know. Stanley Ralph Ross, the writer, had always had issues with Burt Ward, because sometimes Burt Ward would come up to him and go, "You're not giving me enough," and then when he'd put Robin Moore into the script, he'd have then Burt Ward would come up to him and go, "You're giving me too much." So then he'd knock him out for like a good part of an episode on the next script he did and stuff. This one, it's almost like they found their middle ground, the two of them. They're at peace with each other, and Ross really writes Burt Ward very well, because Burt Ward got shafted in the 3rd season, as far as I'm concerned, because a lot of the times it was Batman, it was Batgirl, it was like, we got to work all this in. And here, Robin actually seems to be doing a lot of things. He's leading the questioning in certain scenes. And in this scene here, he gets the whole, cheer up, Batman. Batgirl's got to have her identity, too. He's the voice of reason. And it's great for Burt Ward, but it's just awkward here.
He also chooses scenery, but we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah.
But speaking of young people who have something to say, we get the Beaver. Jerry Mathers is in this episode.
You can't come in here.
Says who, short stuff?
Well, says me. I'm Pop, the stage doorman.
Pop? You ain't old enough to drink pop, far less be called it.
Well, I'm 17, and it's a time-honored theatrical tradition that no matter how old or young the stage doorman is, his name has to be Pop.
Well, good night, Pop.
Good night? Well, I'm not going to sleep for hours yet.
Wanna bet?
Yeah, we get to Act 2, and Jerry Mathers is the stage doorman at the opera house, that's where Barbara figures out, or Batgirl figures out, that the stage is the opera house, because that's where the diamond and the bankroll is. Our two actors carry a diamond, and all right, I get the diamond. You want to wear a diamond on stage? Fine. You carry $20,000 in cash on you, the other actor, while you're performing? It makes no sense. And then add to it all, along comes Jerry Mathers as Pop.
Well, he says that he's a stage doorman, and apparently anyone who's a stage doorman by, I don't know, there's some sort of tradition where if you're a stage doorman, you have to be called Pop, and he's okay with that. And again, they must be dragging out a bit. I have nothing against Jerry Mathers. I watched a couple of episodes of Leave It to Beaver when it was on syndication in the 80s. Mm-hmm. It was okay. I mean, it's boyish charm. The last time I saw him was in an episode of Married with Children, which was interesting. But, I mean, he plays himself. I mean, he still plays the wholesome character. Jerry Mathers, I think, is having fun with this. It's too bad he didn't get to do more in this episode. But, yeah, he does explain that he's a stage doorman, and Chief Standing Pat knocks him out with the Tommy Hawk. And they go on stage where we have these two opera singers that are dressed as a cowboy and a cowgirl. As for the $20,000, I go back to our good friend, the idiotic plot or the comic book plot where I think it was that Catwoman episode where you had Pat Pending who claimed that he put all his money in the mattress because you had all the robberies and the Bat villains out there. And I think when you opera singers, I knew a couple. I had a couple as neighbors in New York, and they're a very interesting bunch. They can be arrogant at times. They live in their own world. They feel because they have a voice that they have the voice. So they kind of feel off stage, as we can see how they're talking to each other, or even off stage, on stage or off stage, that they're holier than thou. So I can understand the pompousness, and I appreciate the gag that, yeah, it would be somebody who's keeping $20,000 on him because, again, he feels that he's a voice. So I don't mind that so much, and I love how the two opera singers are playing off each other, like who's the star and who's the real voice, because that's what they do. I mean, they're always in competition with each other.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate the scene because that is something that if you know any opera singers or you've been around opera singers, this is what they are like. So that didn't bother me so much. I don't know why they're cowboys. I've never seen a cowboy opera. I don't know if they've ever existed, but
well, that may
here.
just be keeping with the theme of, shame and all.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, but it would be interesting. I mean, Shame, of course, comes out. You're right. He has other henchmen that we never see again. I guess because of the budget, I don't know. I guess he went somewhere and said, you want to be part of a robbery or whatever, and then we get the robbery. We get Batgirl, Batman, and Batgirl. I think she's just. It's interesting because while they're knocking Pop out and while they're robbing the two opera singers, Batgirl, Robin, and Batman, I guess, are somewhere off stage. Just like Batgirl's explained everything, how she was able to find Batman, and I'm like, you do know a robbery is going on. It's like you can explain all this after the fact.
Yeah.
but I guess it's more filler.
Shame on you, shame. Unhand them, you fiend.
All right. You!
I gotta ask this, though, with the bat fight. This is a big one. The producers want them to do something different with the soundtrack. Like, why is it not the classic Batman bat fight theme?
Well, Nelson Riddle had left, and Billy May was brought in. Billy May, who did the one season of The Green Hornet, and did a great job with that. I mean, the music on The Green Hornet was fantastic. And he comes up with the Batgirl theme song and the Batgirl fight music. I mean, there are moments in this third season where the original, that whole thing does come in. But for the most part, it is what I call the Batgirl fight music. And it's unfortunate because there are times when Batman and Robin themselves are alone and they're fighting, and for some reason they go with the Batgirl theme. I don't know if it was contractually they couldn't use the original fight music as often, or what the deal was, or if it was just all part of this whole new look. Look at us, we're on one night a week, we're mostly one-part episodes, and we've got Batgirl, so we're going to change everything up and make it fresh. But it was the one thing I always found lacking was, like you said, yeah, the music changes the tempo and it changes the whole tempo of the fight. Although there was one little nice bit in the fight that was, again, sort of a throwback to the first season, was the swing in by Robin on the rope, knocking down a bunch of the goons.
And then, of course, Fanny and Jan, this is when we have the cavalry music, and they come in and they spray Batman, Batgirl, and Robin with the fear gas, where I do have to ask, again, the Scarecrow was introduced in the comics in the 40s. Mm-hmm. Now, he's known for the fear gas. I don't know how Shane got his hands on it. It's not a bad prop if it was given with the right villain. I do know that in comics and in the Batman series in 2005, where Joker breaks into the GCPD and steals Bane's equipment and uses it in an episode, or steals the Mad Hatter's technology, uses it in the Batman animated series, I don't know how Shame got his hand. He doesn't seem too smart to get his hands on this chemical, but whatever. It's just an excuse to, get rid of the characters for the moment. This is where they chew the scenery, but again, it's okay. They use the fear gas on the terrific trio, whatever they're called, and I do like the fact that you have some great line reads where they're cowering, and they're begging for their lives, and Shame, of course, delivers a great line read. I'm not all bad, just mostly, which is great. It happens to be one of the best line reads ever from a villain in that time period. And they decide to take Batgirl, which again, I have to go back to what I said before. What is the point of her being there when she's, they could have taken Robin, or they could have taken Batman, which would have made more sense if you're trying to push Batgirl. But they take her, and somehow they get back to the Batcave, and
yes,
again, yeah, and again, this is where Robin is really, really chewing the scenery, where he's like, "Well, Alfred's always trying to kill us. Well, maybe you're trying to kill me, Batman." And Alfred just happens to have bat antidote put into chicken soup, and I like the gag because chicken soup, you're scared. Get it? I'll put I do have to ask this question because I know it's the 60s. Was Batman a pill popper?
Oh, I think there definitely was. I mean, going all the way back to the first Joker story when he hands Robin a pill because he says he feels a headache coming on, so he takes one, and he hands Robin a pill, and he says, better take it. It might be contagious, because Robin's like, I'm fine, because he can't signal to Robin that they're about to get gassed. So, there's definitely a lot of medicating going on in the Batman 66 series, which today I'm surprised there aren't more people calling out that maybe those scenes need to be removed or something, like some of the other people who are always trying to remove elements of books and such that make the book what it is. I thought it was interesting, too, the whole thing with the fear gas, because, like you said, they get back on their own somehow. They manage, you'd think that, driving the Batmobile at the speeds it goes would scare the hell out of them, but not only that, they need the bat antidote. As we'll discover later on, it seems to wear off over time because Batgirl's fine.
You know what it is? It's either a filler or how do we get back to the Batcave? I can trail off and say that the last time I saw something like this in a comic book, I think was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they were sprayed by a fear gas by Bebop and Rocksteady, and the way that the Turtles fought it off was they realized April was in trouble, and they were able to do mind over matter and conquer their fears and go back to normal. Here, you're right. I understand that there's a budget, and I understand that they can't over-explain everything, but it kind of defeats the purpose if it could just wear off and just to take chicken soup. I can go on and on and on, but it's kind of pointless. They're back to normal anyway. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we're kind of wrapping things up with we're back at their what is it? The Gotham Central City.
Well, hold on. Before you get to that, hang on, because there is one other element too here that doesn't make sense. Now that they're back to normal, he takes a call from Gordon, who is concerned about the fact that there hasn't been an arrest yet. He's getting a lot of pressure from city officials, but also he points out that in addition to all this, his daughter Barbara is missing. She hasn't been seen for like a day or two. And this is an element that's going to appear occasionally in scenes with Gordon, where he's going to go, I'm worried about my daughter. And yet at the very end, there's nothing to wrap up that little worry. Nothing said.
Well, actually, I was going to save that for later, but yeah, because I got a lot to talk about for the second part of this. That's why I wanted to hold on to that one. But yeah, it's kind of like a dead horse. Like this is where you want to scream at the screen again and go like, okay, you still can't tell between the phone call and now and then the next part. Yeah, it's getting to be like ridiculous with that.
Mm-hmm. So we get back to, like you said, the hideout there, and actually Batman and Robin work out where the hideout is, so they head out to try and get Shame. We see that Shame's got, you mentioned Shame's gotten dumber, but there is some brains to him. he needs an acetylene torch, and he sends Fred out to get one with money to actually purchase it. Fred's like, why don't we just steal it? And he goes, no, we're not getting picked up for petty crimes, not when we have a bigger goal to, accomplish. So we'll pay for it. Because being picked up like that would ruin the whole scheme. That shows some brains.
I'm not surprised, but I guess, again, when we go into the second part with what Shame does, but yeah, I guess it's another excuse as well to just have a Shame Fred moment and to have Shame and Fanny and Jan just continue talking and have their bit, which is fine. I mean, it works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay. It feels like I want more of these characters anyway, so I'm really not complaining about this.
Right.
And Batgirl is just like, I guess she's still on the fear gas now. She's just tied up. And, of course, Jan wants to kill Batgirl. And Shame is like, no, we can't because we need her as an ace in the hole. I mean, she's our shield in case anything goes wrong. She's our backup plan. So, yeah, he is starting to show some more brains on that. I'll give him that. And then, of course, he tries to make out with Jam again, and Fanny interferes. But, it's just Pat and Fred walking off camera and coming back onto it, which is fine. Again, everybody does their bits, and it works well. Mm-hmm. The problem is we get to the horseshoe.
Yeah, he's got this horseshoe, which you think the way he's setting it up, he says, here's my lucky horseshoe, everything's going to go fine as long as I've got it. You think that's going to have some major element to the story, maybe later on or something. But instead, it's just a simple device that as they're all leaving, Fanny gets knocked on the head by it, and nobody seems to notice that she's not with them until way later on. So, of course, Batman and Robin come in, they find Fanny, and it's, again, another non-cliffhanger ending.
On your feet. All right, where did Shame go?
What's he going to do with Batgirl?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Yes, we would like to know.
Well, I'll tell you this, dynamic dummies. Do anything to me, and Batgirl's chances of living through the night ain't worth a pitcher of warm tears.
I never met a person I didn't like, Frontier Fanny. But in this case, I may have to make an exception.
Have Batman and Robin been hornswoggled? Watch the next episode for the thrilling conclusion.
As Batman and Fanny eye each other kind of testily, Batman hunching down, trying to meet her eye-to-eye glance and stuff. And it's just so painfully weird.
Oh, I don't mind it. I like how she is trying to stare down Batman, which a lot of people don't do. I mean, the whole point of Batman was that you're supposed to be intimidated. In this universe, it's just a guy dressed as a bat, and nobody's. I don't think anybody's really supposed to be scared. That's the gag, and it's supposed to show that Fanny's not scared of anybody, which is great. Mm-hmm. I don't. The only thing that I mind though is that they have to over-explain the horseshoe. Had they not explained it, and had they just walked over it, and she would have been knocked out with it, and I would have been fine with all that. What I'm not fine with, and I guess we'll get into it, they don't notice for, like, God knows how long. Like, they're walking out, they're in the car, they're in another hideout, they've never noticed that she's not there. Mm-hmm. They're not on their cell phones, people. It's the 60s, so you can't make that excuse. I'm not quite understanding, but I guess it's because Shame, the less he doesn't hear, or the mother-in-law, and I guess, I don't know. It was like they never say, like, Fanny do this, Fanny where's Fanny? No. Okay, well, I don't know. I don't mind the stare down. Again, it's fun. It's kitsch.
It's kitsch, but it's like, and then it carries over into the teaser for the next episode because Fanny won't talk about Shame's plans. She's insulting Batman and such, and he reacts because he's already taken her gun away from her. He's got it in his utility belt. And there's that moment there where he reaches for it, almost like he was ready to use it on her, but he stops himself. It's just, the whole thing with that is just awkward, and it's very uncharacteristic for the series, or uncharacteristic for Batman to be behaving the way he is. Especially when you consider later on, with his final confrontation with Shane, he then sort of has a complete about face.
Well, I know that in the Golden Age of comics, Batman not only used the gun in the beginning, but he was really harder on criminals. Mm-hmm. And I guess even in the 70s, there was a big one where somebody does pull a gun on Batman, and Batman's like, "You dare pull a gun on me?" And he just starts beating this criminal with an inch of his life. I mean, the fans at this point wanted to see a different Batman. I mean, they were okay with the first 2 seasons, but I think by the second half of the second season, they were really getting tired of the Silver Age, and I think that's when the 70s and 80s and 90s and what have you, kind of cemented Batman to what he used to be in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have been interesting. This is the only episode that I think where Batman is really trying to act like the Batman we really wanted. So I'm okay with that. It's awkward then, but now it's, we accept it. I don't mind that much that he pulls the gun and puts it in the utility belt. It would have been smarter to take the bullets out and throw them away. I can go back to a Justice League episode in the 2000s where Batman gets possessed by Deadman and has a gun and looks at it and just tosses it like a hot potato. But yeah, it's nice sometimes to see West trying to be the Batman we wanted him to be.
All right. So we cut to this gun shop that Shane and his people enter. Another really cheap-looking set with the studio background clearly, visible amongst the guns they've got hanging from the fake walls and such. The shopkeeper, another cameo, played by Arnold Stang, comedian of the 60s and 70s and stuff.
Howdy.
How do you do?
That's a good-looking six-shooter you got up there.
Oh, would you like to have a look at it?
I'd be mighty grateful if you wouldn't mind.
It's a beautiful piece of machinery.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of machinery. How much is that?
At $69.95.
Well, that's $69.95. That's too much. Do it shoot straight?
Up to 300 yards.
All right, in that case, stick 'em up.
I had a funny feeling you were gonna say that.
All right, gang, hang 'em up on the wall for safekeeping. Come on, get all that stuff ready for the great train robbery. Come on, let's hustle it up here. Come on, let's go, come on.
The Minuteman, will you put me down? I'll give you all nice presents. Will you stop it? What are you doing?
Shane robs him of the guns and ammo, and it's then that Jan realizes that Fanny's missing, and this whole teaser ends once again like all the other teasers in third season, just very weirdly, as Shane agrees to try, and this, I don't know, this bothered me. This whole, I hate the teasers on Batman third season because there's no tension to them. It's all right, we'll go free Fanny, boom, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, I think it's because they went from teasers to cold openings.
Yeah,
where it was okay, but again, I mean, we have, as you said, Arnold Stang, of course, was the voice of Top Cat.
Yes,
and he was, of course, in my favorite movie of all time, Mad Man, Mad Mad World. But I do like, again, when Jam and Shane are talking to each other and they're doing a bit where, it's my mother and she's the only one that I got and, isn't ugly. He's like, well, what does your father look like? And she's like, oh, my father was beautiful. Like they're doing a bit between each other.
Oh, yeah.
And Shane is right, again, where he's like, well, I can't just walk into police headquarters because that'll be putting a noose around my neck. And Jam is pleading and saying, well, why can't we just switch Batgirl with Fanny? And, we do go to that end of the teaser where that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the prisoner swap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we go into where this is what I wanted to talk about. This is where I wanted to save it for. Where this opening where they're all at Chief O'Hara's... no, not Chief O'Hara. They're in Gordon's office. Chief O'Hara's there, of course. And this is where they're wondering, with Batgirl getting captured and they have Fanny. And Pat just walks in. He offers the prison swap. And Gordon goes no. And Pat is like, okay, I just want another scalp anyway. Batman stands on the headdress, which again, I go back to that Egghead episode where Bruce respects Native Americans. I don't know why he's stepping on the headdress. But yeah, he does bring up the fact that Batgirl is an important part. And again, this is what I wanted to save it because Gordon is not putting two and two together. He was willing to have Batgirl die so Fanny couldn't be released, which makes little to no sense because it's still a human life, whether it's Barbara or not. And that's kind of dark for Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that it's his daughter. Now, you're right. We've talked about Barbara. We talked about Gordon. I've trailed off and talked about this animated episode for eons, the Over the Edge episode, where Gordon finally finds out that Barbara was Batgirl, and Batgirl gets killed by Scarecrow and finds out that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and he home invades the Wayne Mansion, and Bruce Wayne is, he loses all his money, and Gordon is humiliated, and he's forced to resign from the police department. It's a great episode. But you can't do that in Batman 66, I understand that, but it really would have been awkward at this point that we could have not only lost Batgirl, we could have lost Barbara, but I know that's not going to happen, but it's still like dark for Gordon to just say, let Batgirl die regardless.
Oh, it's incredibly dark. It's incredibly dark, but he also admits at the start of that scene that he's distracted by the thoughts of his missing daughter. I think under normal circumstances, he would have been just as eager to say, yes, let's do it, fine. But it's interesting, he turns it over. He says, I leave the whole decision to you, Batman. He gives up his authority.
Well, and I keep going back to that argument because here's the thing. He's concerned about Barbara. And he's concerned about, and he's talked about it in the second season as we're about to be introduced to Barbara, and he talks about Barbara. If he knows that Batgirl, or at least he says, well, it reminds me of Barbara, I would accept the line of Gordon saying something like, well, I have a daughter, and I'm sure Batgirl has a father, and as a father, I wouldn't want anything to happen to Batgirl. I mean,
right.
Instead, he just goes, and this is why I think people hate the GCPD so much, because whether it's Batman 66 or any animated movie or any live-action movie, they leave everything up to either Bruce Wayne or Batman at the end. And I feel that this is the most useless, incompetent police force ever.
Right.
That you're the commissioner and you're just letting Batman make this decision? No, but,
Yeah, yeah. So Batman agrees, though, to the conditions. They're going to meet at the pavilion at 11. Shame wants to set up an ambush, so he gets there early. And it's interesting, too, because this time he shows no compunction. There's a little change in his character about shooting the two down without a gun. In the first story he did, he was at least always willing to give Batman the gun.
Well, he's changed a lot. I mean, again, I have to go back to that Shame episode, but I think there was something in the second episode where I think they were at a Wild West theme park or something, and Batman was discussing or educating Shame on the rules of the West, and Shane was like, well, that doesn't count in Oklahoma, Missouri, or something to that effect. I can't remember.
Right.
So I think Shane always changes the rules as he goes along, and you can tell that this is something the character does. So I wasn't too surprised that he would respect Batman, but now he's changing the rules. Yeah, the character seems to change as he goes along.
Yeah, he does. Well, they all do to a certain extent. There's very few characters who are consistent with how they behave and such in this show. It's always a matter of what works for the story and such. Batman and Robin and Batgirl get there, and Batman has a chemical that he throws at them that makes the bullets and guns heavier, making them useless. So, because they're about to, just mow them down, and Batman's like, I'm not going to use Fanny as a shield, so he uses that chemical and such.
Doggone it. Doggone it, Batman. You cheated. You know we ain't no good in a fair fight.
That's what I was counting on, Shane.
Like I mentioned before, she seems to have shrugged off the fear gas naturally because she manages to get loose and joins the fight. And again, this is why I say it's almost like Stanley Ralph Ross, the director, everybody seems to have made their peace with Burt Ward, because Robin gets a nice little scene in the midst of this bat fight where he's taking down 3 or 4 of the guys, including one of them with a flying kick.
It's an interesting fight. They all do what they have to do. The gas wears off, and then of course we have piñatas that just happen to be over the heads of Batgirl, Robin, and Batman.
Oh, that's a stereotype of the 60s and 70s, having the conveniently placed objects to knock them out. I was fine with that.
I was, but again, piñatas are not that heavy, but okay, whatever. I mean...
Well, that's true.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, I guess, to have candy come out or something in them. But if you would have put rocks in them or something and said why they were that heavy, but whatever the case may be, they get away.
Okay, come on, let's get while the getting's good. They ain't gonna deduct our plan anyway. Two hoots and a holler, head up.
Batgirl kind of apologizes that even though the gas wore off, she was just in the trunk of the car and she could barely hear anything that they were doing, which again, they put her in the trunk of the car, and I go back to what I said before. She's dressed in purple. She has the red hair. Scooby-Doo was at it this time. She's almost Daphne Blake, where she gets captured a few times. I understand Batgirl, what she was supposed to be. I mean, we've talked about this a millions of times about what she was supposed to be. I'm still kind of disappointed that she can't do too much to try to escape from the car, or well, at least she tries to fight in a few of the choreographed fights. But again, she was supposed to be replacing Robin in season 4 if that happened. So other than her looking good in the suit, I don't really see too much other than, we have to say Batgirl and, she's off somewhere kicking or doing air kicks.
Well, I would assume that had they gone to a 4th season, there would have had to have been a shift in the character and how she was portrayed. And who knows, maybe even NBC might have been a bit more open to the idea of her doing more than kicks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did like, though, this scene, though, because when we get to Act 2 and we're back at Gordon's office, again, still continuing on, no word from Barbara and the little reassurance. And it's, again, that whole dense, she's standing right next to you, man. Right next to you. You don't notice it. You don't, I know this is going to sound sexist in a way, but we are talking the 1960s. You didn't notice that maybe Batgirl's wearing the same perfume as your daughter? Because I can't imagine Barbara not switching perfume, like having the sense to do that. To me, it would be just like you're wearing it or trying to wash it, because she doesn't have time to wash it off. She's wearing the same perfume. Little things like that, it's just that's when you start like really stretching the credibility and such. But notice again, Robin gets the conversation going. Batgirl, did you notice anything while you were with them? And he's leading the whole talk as they go through the whole series of trains that could be likely targets. But it's O'Hara who gets, to be the inspiration when he offers to buy them sodas, and he's got the old money that needs to be destroyed, really.
Yeah, I do love... Well, Barbara, of course, uses the woman's intuition line again about getting aware how Barbara's going to be okay and whatever. Yeah, but you're right. They're in the office. I guess they're kind of doing what they did in Batman 66, where they're kind of pacing and not banging into each other about what Shame is going to do with his next plan. And apparently Barbara overheard something about the Great Train Robbery, because it's only discussed a few times. Even Fred is like mouthing it because he's tired of hearing it.
Yes.
But yeah, they're trying to figure out what train that Shame is trying to rob, and it's a good thing that Chief O'Hara is still in the that this is what I love about the 60s. Like, oh well, why don't we just get some soft drinks? And he's going through this wad of money, and there's this torn up piece of paper, and Batman's like, that's the train that Shame is going to rob, the one where all the tattered money is going to be taken to the treasury and get burned. And I'm like, well, if they didn't want to order soft drinks, then they wouldn't have known. It's the world's greatest detective, man. And I mean, this is the world's greatest detective, and Chief O'Hara has to offer soft drinks and put that together. To me, okay, whatever. But you're right. It's a train robbery. It's taking tattered money for it to be burned. Okay, fine. And
we see, though, now all the elements of Shame's plan going into action. The rails are severed with the acetylene torch, like he wanted. Yeah. That stops the train. Then the plating of the car is cut because and my wife's cracking up as we're watching this, because she's sitting next to me watching this last night, and she's cracking up because she's like, oh, look at that. Well, it'll only happen. She's like, if the guard would just shut his mouth, maybe nothing would have happened, because the guard's explaining how, the train can't be stopped unless this happens. Oh, we can't be penetrated unless this happens. And Shame's got it all worked out. And then because he cuts through the opening with the diamond that was stolen, he floods the car with the fear gas, so the people offer no resistance in there, and they're able to walk away with something like 80 million, of which he says, 60 is probably good. I mean, I'm rounding down the numbers, but roughly that. Yeah.
I love how Fred is trying to ask how they're going to split the money.
And how is this vast fortune to be allocated?
Yeah. He's Mexican, all right. Look, Fred, I got no truck for a man that talks 8 pounds to the word. Now, you talk English like us normal folks, or don't talk, Fred. Get it?
Got it.
Good.
Yeah.
I love how Fanny goes like, "What do I get?" And Seamus like, "Well, you get a rich son-in-law." Yeah. So that's pretty good. Batman, what is it now at this point that he uses the Batdrone plane?
Well, yeah, because he decides he's going to call Shame out, playing on his ego, and challenge him to a final fight and such. So we see the return of the Batdrone, which we saw in the Minstrel episode back in the second season. He's going to use it to skywrite a message to Shame, and what a message! I mean, I've seen skywriting in the sky before. It tends to dissipate after a while. You would think the start of the message would already be breaking up by the time the end of the message is done.
I've had skywriting over my neighborhood for the past couple weeks, and it dissipates after maybe 30 seconds, depending on chemicals they're using. But my question is, because I've tried to research this, have they ever come out with this Batdrone toy or remote control bat plane or anything that does skywriting? Because it seems like a toy. Yeah, because this seems like the toy at the time that you would have wanted. Mm-hmm. It would have been expensive, but yeah, it is weird. But what's even odder, and I knew they were going to do this. I knew somehow they were going to do this because World's Finest Comics were around. It's a call to Superman.
Yes.
It is. Look up in the. I mean, it's DC Comics. I love it. It's like, look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's. I kind of wonder. And I know that we lost George Reeves before, the Batman 66 episodes were out. But I kind of wonder if we ever would have gotten that Superman-Batman team-up just once. Mm-hmm. How interesting that really would have been. But, yeah, it's Batman pretty much calling Shame out, and he wants to do it in a condemned alley because he doesn't want citizens around, a.k.a. the budget is really low. We don't have time to bring citizens into this anyway. I don't think there were many in the third season.
No, there weren't. No.
So I don't quite understand why they have to over-explain this or whatever. But before we get into that, of course.
Oh, there's that scene.
Man's got to do what he's got to do. That's why I deliberately chose that urban renewal area, the one that's condemned, so that no innocent bystanders would get shot up.
You may get shot up.
This town's got to be cleaned up so that little children are safe and happy and healthy growing up. Well, in case something happens to me, I know you'll carry on without me, Chief O'Hara. In case something happens, Commissioner.
Good luck.
Thank you. Bad girl.
Batman, I...
Don't say it, Robin. I understand.
That's clearly padding. To me, it's downright stupid. I mean, especially because I don't know if you caught it. Nobody else seems to have mentioned it. I was kind of surprised Chris Gould missed it in Batman at 45. To me, it seems as though Adam West is doing his best. I put air quotes around it. His best Gary Cooper impression as he's talking about, we got to do what we got to do, and we got to protect the citizens. He's not speaking in Adam West tone at that point there. He's doing Gary Cooper getting off, because there's even a reference by O'Hara where he says, "Oh, this reminds me of that movie Low Midnight," which is supposed to be the joke on High Noon.
Yeah,
it's all. I mean, the whole thing just grates on me on what is overall a pretty good episode. That scene, right down to Batman checking his belt and cowl before he leaves.
But yeah, we know what Shame is going to do. He's going to double cross.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Fanny, Fred, Pat, and Jam are going to be somewhere in an alleyway are going to ambush and kill Batman in cold blood.
Right.
And we know that the sidekicks or whatever, that Robin and Batgirl know that it's going to be some sort of double cross, so they sneak and they hide behind, the double crosses regardless, and use the batarangs. But while all this is going on anyway, Shame is trying to insult Batman, and this is where you can tell this is where it gets a little grating.
What's wrong, Shame? Lost your nerve?
How far you figure we are apart?
18 feet, 6.5 inches.
We're less than 20 feet apart. You hear me? We're less than 20 feet apart.
See, I liked that. I thought it was just so silly.
Big sissy, you couldn't drive nails in a snowbank.
Why would I want to?
You ready to give up and admit I'm better than you are?
What for?
'Cause I'm gonna whoop you.
You're pretty handy with your mouth, Shame. Much more so than with your fists.
Batman realizes it was a double cross.
Oh, no! No, spare me, Batman. I ain't nearly as ornery as I ought to be.
Ooh.
Oh, don't do that, Batman.
Stand up, Shame. You're not worthy of the name Shame. You're a sham shame. Don't ever cry on my tights or pull my leg again.
Shame tries to pull a gun out of his hat because it was underneath his hat, and Batman just flicks it off, and they do fight, and I can't believe how Shame does get a few punches in.
Yeah, the punches that he gets in are a little bit too... My best explanation is Batman's just sizing him up before he takes him down. But yeah, it's a bit much, and I cannot... See, now my problem with the whole scene is the very ending, because I'm okay with him giving him the moralizing speech, but then he's got to look to the camera. I hate when he looks at the camera.
Oh, I don't mind that, because he's trying to talk to the kids. He's trying to be a role model. I mean, the whole thing with 66 was that Batman had to be a role model to kids, that the reason why weapons were terrible and why kids should stay in school. And as much as I didn't like the PSAs in the 80s and 90s and I just wanted to be entertained, Batman found a way to do it where it was classy.
On your feet, Shame. Shame, I look at you with a mixture of emotions. Sympathy and disgust. You're heading for the last roundup, Shame, because of your greed and your avarice. Otherwise, you might have realized that good, even though it's sometimes sidetracked, always triumphs over evil.
It's just when Batman breaks the fourth wall, and which is what he did, he didn't do it a lot, you're right, but he did do it mostly in the third season. And again, it was all part of this whole thing I have about, by the third season, Adam West got tired of being the joke. He wanted in on the joke. And so more was written, to have him like look at the audience and almost like wink. It's like, hey kids, you get it? To me, it's like you shatter the illusion immediately, and suddenly it's all just a joke now. It's no longer, hey, it's this bizarro world of Batman. It's like, no, it's just this weird, funny, look at us, we're taking the Mickey out of Batman. Now, I don't usually talk about the ending because the ending's usually just set up the following week, but we do get a scene in Gordon's office where everybody's gathered and we're all good, and here's what happened to Shame and here's what happened to Calamity Jan and all. My problem with the scene is, again, here was an opportunity to sort of have, you could have had Barbara there instead of Batgirl and going, gee, Dad, I don't know why you worried. I did, it was very last minute. Me and the girls were gone on a vacation or something. But no, everything's fine. And Gordon's worries, we don't worry about it. It's just done. Again, it's those little scenes that they would put in throughout the thing. It's those little things that just, to me, screamed of almost like padding.
I kind of feel that there's somewhere out there on YouTube where there was a gag somewhere where people were making fun of Batman 66 where Batgirl said to Gordon, Gordon look over there for a minute, and she took off the wig and the cowl and goes, "It's me, Barbara," and go, "Look over there," and she put it back on again. I think there was something like that on YouTube. I do know that in the College Humor that, like, it was Superman, Batman, and Gordon as they were trying to make fun of Batman versus Superman, and I think Clark put his glasses on, and Batman was like, "Wait, where did Superman go? Clark is here." All of a sudden, Superman has to take off the glasses. Like, "Oh, Superman, did you see Clark?" There's something along those lines. I just kind of feel that the writers didn't know how to write how Batgirl was trying to explain what's going on with the alter ego and vice versa. They were so concerned about filler and plot holes that the writing to me was always lazy throughout the entire series. I'm like, well, Bruce Wayne is here, but Batman's not here, and Batman's not here, and Bruce, I kind of just got to a point where I can't be nitpicky anymore. I just feel that you have to accept what the writers could have done and should have done, and I guess they kind of felt that the audience knew about it and they kind of accepted it, and if the characters were that stupid, then it's on you.
All right, I just briefly want to talk. I mean, we're towards the end of the series here now, and at this point, you'd think there's everything you could possibly say about a writer or a director of the show, considering the third season had pretty much a stock group of writers. There weren't many that were brought in from outside. Stanley Ralph Ross wrote this one, but this has to be the one episode where he, I think, injected the most humor, the most one-liners. But there was something interesting. I was looking at Cinefantastique, the magazine. I have their issue where they did their own Batman 66 episode guide with their reviews, little quick one-line reviews and stuff. And they had little commentary from Ross himself. Now, yes, he wrote the Egghead episode, the Archer episode, the Siren episode, the King Tut episode. A lot of times, though, when you see that writer credit, that doesn't necessarily mean they created the character. They may have shaped the character, but they give him credit for actually creating those characters. And he states that Shame is his favorite character that he created after Archer.
Well, I like Archer. And you know why I like Archer? I like Archer because it's Art Carney who played him. I think if any other actor would have played Archer, but you know what? I remember this episode showing up in syndication during Batman 89 when WPIX was showing the marathons of Batman Returns. I'm a fan of Art Carney, and I loved, the Maid Marilyn character, and I like the idea. I mean, I like the idea that you have how Gotham is poor and you have a Robin Hood character, and how does Batman deal with a Robin Hood character when the poor are being neglected. The only thing I didn't like about that episode was where Alfred was about to be beheaded and it turned out to be a stage guillotine. But past all of it, I'm a huge fan of Carney, and I thought it's not the greatest episode. It shouldn't have been a season 2 premiere episode. Definitely it should have been a season 3. But it's, again, the way that Egghead, it's played by Vincent Price, and Shame is played by Cliff Robertson. Art Carney, I love the character that he's trying to talk like Robin Hood in Brooklyn slang, and it just works.
Wow. You're a rare breed, because most people I know don't like that episode.
Oh, I love Carney. So he just anything he touched turned to gold.
Wow. All right. Bat Gadget. Anything stand out for you?
Well, I guess it's got to be that communicator that's pretending to be Batman's voice.
Okay.
I mean, I would go with the drone, but only because if that was a real life toy, that would have been. I mean, the way it was designed, that would have been awesome. But the gadgets are a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I go with the drone. I'd go with the drone. We just talked about this a few minutes ago. Let's see if you remember. What's the name of the movie O'Hara references in part 2 of this story?
Well, he calls it Little Midnight, but it is based on High Noon.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And by the way, that trivia question, I don't know if I've been mentioning this in the last couple of episodes. Trivia question is from Joel Eisner's official Batman Bat book. Get that over on Amazon.com. Or eBay can be your friend sometimes, especially considering the cost of the book these days.
Yeah, I lucked out. I got it on Amazon. I got it for a very good price.
Oh, good. All right, so we come to the end of the episode. You're Robin the Boy Wonder. You've been watching this episode with Batman down in the Batcave, and you turn to him. How do you sum up this episode in a holy expletive? Well, maybe not an expletive.
yeah, this is a family show. But I would go with Holy Wild Wild West Batman. I mean, they do their best not to do the stereotypes again, like with the last Shame episode that he was at the old Wild West theme park type of thing area. Here he's at stables, and he's got the henchman, the Mexican British guy. He's got the chief. He's got Fanny. The henchmen are the best things. He has the best line reads. Cliff Robertson was also known for two great Twilight Zone episodes that were on syndication during the time of Batman. The Dummy and a Western episode, 100 Yards Over the Rim. And anytime Robinson, you would have him up close, and the way he would talk and his mouth would get all rubbery, I love just watching him talk. Robinson just is the best thing about this episode.
He is. He really is. And I'm glad he came back for it. I gotta agree with you. I'd say holy shame, come back shame. I mean, why did it take this long to develop a two-parter in the third season that is almost something that you could really enjoy and appreciate? I mean, and that was worth watching. I mean, we're done now with the two-parters. From this point on, it's all one-part episodes. And it's a shame, excuse the pun, that they didn't develop this more in even the final episodes. I mean, think about it. It feels more like a second season episode. It just happens to have Batgirl. There's Gordon, there's O'Hara, and there's Alfred, yes. But rather than trying to expand their roles, they play the roles they really did play in the first and second season. Alfred's there asking the questions in the Batcave. Gordon and O'Hara are kind of inept and playing a little bit of the comedy and what have you, although O'Hara does manage to sort of spur the plot along a little. There are goons, there's a mall, there's a mother-in-law, there are bat gadgets. The only thing missing in this whole thing is a proper cliffhanger. I love this episode, and you're right. It is underappreciated among Batman fans.
Again, did you really want to see a two-part episode with Minerva or a two-part episode with Dr. Cassandra? I probably would have, because I like those two characters and I like those two actors. But, I think what it goes down to, it's been discussed. I think what it comes down to for season 3, the novelty was definitely wearing off. And yes. I think William Dozier definitely wanted... My brain locked up for a minute there. I know William Dozier definitely wanted two-parters to come back. They were the best part because they felt like you getting yourself a comic book, and why are you going to buy the second issue of the comic book? Because you want to see what happens at the end of the first part, if not another adventure. So, and I think that's what they tried to do with season 3. Like, okay, well, here's the villain who's going to show up next time, and they tried to still make that like a comic book, but ratings were dipping, and people were just getting to the point where, okay, the one-liners are getting way too silly, and Batgirl is really not doing much, and Robin's novelty is wearing off because he's not the Robin as he is in the comics, and we have a cowboy, or we have, the London Larcenaries, that whole episode. I can't wait to listen to that one. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of coulda, woulda, shouldas, but television is very fickle.
All right, so let me ask you, as we start to wrap up this episode, what's going on over at the Hunnic Outcast podcast?
Oh, well, right now we wrapped up season 2, and season 3, thankfully, will not be campy and kitschy. However, we are going to be discussing Batman. When we come back in September, we're doing our DC Animated Universe Volume 1 retro series, where myself, Kendra, and Edward Hale, and Todd A. Davis, we're all picking one DCAU movie to discuss leading up to the release of The Killing Joke. As you know, Hamill and Conroy and Tara Strong are coming back, and we're stoked. So we're picking 4 movies to discuss. Todd has picked Master of the Phantasm. I picked Dark Knight Returns because it's better than Batman vs. Superman. And Kendra and Edward are being silent about what they're picking, and then we're going to finalize it with Killing Joke. From there, because Don Bluth has announced that he's coming back with an animated movie on Dragon's Lair, of all things, we're going to be discussing Don Bluth films, everything from Secret of NIMH, American Tail, Land Before Time, Rock-a-Doodle, Anastasia, finalizing it with, of course, Titan AE. Because a new Harry Potter movie is coming out, we're going to be discussing all the Harry Potter movies and then finalizing Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. And because we're doing this family-themed episode, we're going to end Season 3 with the Godfather saga. So that's going to be... It's going to be a very interesting Season 3, to say the least.
Wow. Yeah, that does definitely sound interesting. Now, where can people, if they want to sign on for third season, where can they get a hold of your podcast?
If you go into iTunes, Hunnic Outcasts, and if you don't want to subscribe to iTunes, we're now on SoundCloud. That's where the permanent RSS feed is going to be, on SoundCloud.com, Hunnic Outcasts. And of course, we're on Player FM, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, all Hunnic Outcasts. And on Facebook, Hunnic Outcasts, we have 2 group pages. The Hunnic Outcasts on Facebook groups, which is any fans or anybody who wants to plug their work, or the Podcasters Cafe, where if you're a podcaster like to listen to podcasts, it's another group page. And of course, on Twitter, @Hunnic Outcasts. And finally, email hunnicfeedback@gmail.com. So there are numbers of ways to find us at this point. And eventually we are going to be putting up our Facebook page. And of course, we have, was it the Google domain, but there was something, the WordPress. So we're definitely going to be kicking off in September. And of course, we have a Kickstarter. If you go on our webpage through Guerrilla Comics, we have it for 29 days where we're, for independent writers and artists, we're putting together a Kickstarter to launch some stuff, so you can find us anywhere on those pages.
Very cool. Well, I got to say thank you once again for sitting down with me, and I'm glad that this time we were able to share a better episode of Batman third season.
Yeah, and it's ironic, too, because the last time we talked about Penguin, and I think before I'm on, a Penguin is before, and just like the last time, the next episode is a King Tut one, and, well, he's still my favorite villain, and I can't wait to hear what you discuss about him. But yeah, this is an interesting King Tut caper too, so that'll be interesting to listen to.
It's an interesting King Tut caper. It's also, I believe, the last time we're going to hear the Batman fight music as Batman and Robin fight King Tut and his goons inside the Batcave. And you know, whenever anybody gets inside the Batcave, somebody else has to be there as well to talk about it. So coming back for that episode is author-editor Jim Beard, and he's being joined, as we do a double villain episode here, he's being joined by writer Robert Greenberger, and the two of them are going to be discussing with me the last King Tut episode of the Batman 66 series. I'm looking forward to that because, yeah, it's always something special whenever anybody got inside the Batcave.
And it's an interesting one, too, and they kind of do a callback. I don't want to spoil it, but they do kind of do a callback to one of my favorite Bat gadgets, so it's going to be... And it's the last one. You know what? It's not the worst one, either. It's probably one of my favorite King Tuts.
Oh, yeah. No, I would agree, too. And we'll talk more about it on the next episode. So until next time, folks, thanks once again for listening, citizens. Take care.
Gotta catch a train, John. Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com, or by phone at 888-866-9010. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com, that's LIBSYN.com, or through iTunes. The Batcave podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, same bat time, same Batcave podcast.
You were magnificent, Batman. That was some shootout on that deserted street.
Some shootout without guns, Commissioner.
Shame had a gun, and the way you flicked it out of his hand was brilliant.
It reminded me of that great old movie, Low Midnight or something. It's all in a day's crime fighting. Have you heard from Warden Crichton, Commissioner?
Well, Shame is back pitching horseshoes in the prison yard, but this time rubber horseshoes.
And Calamity Jan and Frontier Fanny are on police detail.
Police detail?
Well, policing up the cells in the women's cell block, that is.
At last, maybe things will get back to normal around here.
Normal, Chief O'Hara? With that famed Yale professor of Egyptology back in his King Tut alter ego, escaping from a Gotham City prison psychiatrist's couch to begin another cunning caper calculated to confound our terrific trio? Watch the next episode to see just how normal things are not going to be in Gotham City.